Hey guys, so I don't usually do video posts while I'm touring or traveling for educational things like master classes, or in this case I'm out in San Francisco teaching at the San Francisco Conservatory, where I'm on faculty as a visiting artist, and I teach there 1 week every month. So for you high school students checking out different programs, make sure to check out the San Francisco Conservatory, really incredible program that just started out there. But getting to the point, I don't usually do videos when I'm on the road, but I do want to make a quick little video post today talking about a few things that I keep on noticing people doing in their practicing that is quite frankly wrong, and there's really easy ways to fix all of these things. So let's talk about them. The first thing has to do with transcription. So first of all, when you transcribe, you have to learn the chord changes. And I keep on finding, especially with horn players and saxophonists, but really a lot of musicians end up doing this. They learn the line, they learn the single line, and they don't actually know how it relates to the chord changes. So if you're learning these lines and you don't actually know the chord changes to the song, you don't have them memorized, you don't have them in your ear, then the notes end up just being random and you don't actually fully absorb the material that you're learning. So for instance, like here's one of my favorite Sonny Rollins solos, St. Thomas. I'm sure a lot of you guys will recognize this. I'm going to play a little quietly because I'm in a hotel. So that's one of the lines that he plays on St. Thomas, or a part of a line. And if you don't know the chord changes, then the significance of the notes and how well they function is really going to be lost on you. So on this one, he just starts on the third. He goes 3, flat 5, 7, flat 9, because it's half diminished chord. So he's really just arpeggiating the 3, 5, 7, 9. And then he voice leads perfectly in the second bar, which is a B7 flat 9. He raps diatonically around the 5th. And then he ends up doing an enclosure later in that bar. We'll talk about enclosures in a second here. But really, you have to know the chord changes so you know how everything functions, especially when you want to start creating your own lines and constructing your own lines in your improvisation. You're going to be able to use what you learn from transcriptions if you understand how the notes function. So super important, number one, learn the chord changes to everything that you transcribe and analyze how the notes function with the harmony. And just a quick little postscript here. So people ask a lot of times if it's okay to read transcriptions or if you need to transcribe yourself. That's a great question. Both are great methods. A lot of times it actually is totally fine to read the transcriptions, especially when you're having trouble hearing it yourself. The important thing is that you have to memorize the transcription, or at least memorize the parts that you really dig. Because when you memorize it, then it's going to get into your ear. You're going to absorb the material way more. And then when you hear somebody else play something similar in a different setting, say you're learning a Sonny Rollins solo and then later you're learning a Dexter Gordon solo, then when you hear Dexter use some of that same material that Sonny was using, you're going to identify it much more quickly, much quicker, because you're going to have it memorized and in your ear. It's going to really stick with you a lot more. But again, it really helps if you know the chord changes. So if you are transcribing something, make sure that the chord changes are there, or write them out yourself. Ron Fix did a really awesome transcription book of a bunch of solos that I've done over the past few years, and he was incredibly meticulous, just getting all of the notes perfect and making sure that all the chord changes were there too, so people would have that as a reference. And so if you find a transcription that does not have the chord changes, super important to write them out yourself so you can just see how everything lines up. Okay, so the number 2 thing that people are doing wrong with their practice and that you really need to fix, technique and general kind of warm-up exercises, exercises that you do to maintain your technique, to build your technique, and to even build your vocabulary. You can't just rely on scales. You have to play technical exercises that really incorporate what we do as jazz musicians. Things like adding approach notes and enclosures. I talked about that enclosure that Sonny Rollins did in his solo earlier on St. Thomas. Now, of course, you can pick up approach notes and enclosures and those types of concepts from transcription, but you also need to really practice the mechanical element of this and get it under your fingers and into your ears. So that's one of the reasons why I released this PDF package on my website recently. It's called 15 Approach Note and Enclosure Exercises for Jazz Musicians. You can check it out on my website, link below. And one of the reasons why I did that is because I find that people really have no idea what to practice a lot of times for technique going beyond scales. So the approach note and enclosure exercises, they end up sounding kind of like this. This one is an example of one of the ones from the book. It's exercise 7. And then when you're improvising with this sort of thing, so there I just did a ton of different approach note and enclosure cells, you could call them groups of notes, that are inspired by the type of exercises that I wrote out in this book. Okay, so the third and final thing that we're going to talk about that I find that people keep on practicing wrong is related to metronome practice. And I find that people are putting the metronome on every single beat. So maybe they're playing an exercise and they're playing the exercise at 200 BPM and they're nailing it there. But all of a sudden, if you pull it back so you only get 50 BPM and it's just giving you beat 1 of every bar, all of a sudden it's a mess. And people are rushing or they're dragging and the time goes out the window because all of a sudden they have to provide the time on their own. So I'm going to show you an example of how you want to practice this sort of thing. I'm going to play an exercise where essentially I'm going to be playing it at 280 beats per minute as far as where the quarter note is, but I'm just going to give myself the whole note. So I'm going to get the metronome just on 70, and I'm going to do an exercise from the book. I'm going to do exercise 9 from that book that I was just telling you about with the approach notes and enclosures. It's going to sound like this. And so it's very tricky. You'll notice I was rushing a tad at the very beginning of it, and then I was able to pull myself back. And it's much harder than if I were to just put the metronome at 280 and just get every single beat and not have to provide the time on my own. So whether you're playing exercises, whether you're just jamming and playing over a tune, whether you're playing through a transcription without the recording, no matter what you're practicing, if you're doing it with a metronome, you really need to practice with a metronome at a range of tempos. I could even slow this down to 35 beats per minute. Now I'm just getting beat 1 every 2 bars. I'm going to do that same exercise. 2, So that's really going to improve your internal time if you do that. Really important to practice that way. All right, so make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel here if you haven't already, and definitely check out my website for the PDF packages that I was talking about earlier. Really useful practice tools. And yeah, look out for more releases coming up. I've got a bunch of electric band stuff coming out over these next few months. And check out my website for tour dates, and check out my Bands in Town page as well for touring. I've been touring a ton this year. I've been traveling for practically half the year, so make sure to look out for my show dates because I might be coming to a place near you. So stay tuned. Thanks for checking out the video, guys, and have a great rest of your day.